Hello and welcome to the naturopathic vlog. My name is Jason Lee, naturopathic doctor, and I'm welcoming you here to come and talk about some tips on health and wellness. So today's topic is all about iron. It's one of the most common deficiencies I see in the practice on a nutrient level. A lot of patients will come in, they'll have their laboratory tests from their doctor and they'll say, my iron's low, they prescribe me an iron supplement. Now some people will take the supplement and their iron levels increase, which is awesome, but sometimes people take the supplements and their iron levels don't really change at all, and they just keep taking more and more and more of them. The problem with some of these supplements is they can cause constipation or digestive issues, and they're not really addressing sometimes the root of the issue as to why the iron is low in the first place. What's also interesting about iron is that if you look at the blood work for iron, the normal score is somewhere between 30 and 300. So a patient could technically come in with an iron score of 31, 32, or maybe even less, and they'll say, well, it's still within normal range, but there's a huge discrepancy between 30 and a level of 300. So ideally, we're looking for iron levels somewhere around the 60 or 70 mark at a minimum, as opposed to the 30s or less. So when you're assessing iron, again, the key is to find out what's causing it. Currently, iron is the only nutrient deficiency which is significantly prevalent in industrialized countries. About 70% of the body's iron is found in red blood cells, called hemoglobin, and the rest is found in muscle cells, called myoglobin. There are hundreds of hemoglobin molecules that make up of iron, which makes into the red blood cell. And the key with the hemoglobin is it helps the body bind oxygen from the lungs to transport the tissues in the body. So it's almost like how the nutrients are fed to the bodies through the red blood cell, and to do that we need hemoglobin. In addition to its vital role in the formation of red blood cells, iron is an essential micronutrient that allows the body to produce enzymes, regulate hormones, and other substances essential for proper growth and development. So it's very, very important. It's not just about a mineral, it's about what that mineral does to the body. If you can imagine, every cell in the body is like a worker in a factory or a worker in a company. They all need nutrition to drive production in that company. If there's deficiencies going to the nutrition of those people, they can't produce, they can't perform, and the company fails. So iron is very, very important to our survival and very important to our day-to-day functioning. So in trying to understand why someone have low iron, let me explain in a way that might make a bit more sense. There's a couple reasons why we can have low iron. We can have low iron because you just have no iron in the system, we're not taking enough in, or we're not transporting enough iron, which would cause low iron, or iron's being leached out of the system somehow, which is another way we can lose iron. So to put into sort of a story to help you understand a bit more, it's kind of like if I own a television store that sells TVs, and TVs are like the iron. If I have no TVs in stock, that means I can't sell any TVs, so therefore we're low in stock, we're low in TVs, we can't sell them, and therefore the store doesn't do so well. That'll be like a low iron picture. The other scenario is we have a lot of TVs in my warehouse, but no TVs in stock, and the transport truck that brings those TVs to the store is not working, so therefore I can't transport any TVs to my store, I can't sell them, so we have low TVs, the store doesn't do well either. Think of that transport truck like albumin protein. Albumin is a protein that carries things around in the body, and albumin bound to iron creates a compound called ferritin. So if we're low in ferritin, we are low in transporting the iron, but we may still have a lot of iron, we just can't transport it properly. The third situation is someone stealing TVs out of my store when it's closed at night. So I close the store up at night, we have TVs in the store, and guess what? I open the store up and the TVs are gone because someone stole them. So that's like iron being leached out of the body in a different kind of way. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why you have low iron, but at least that explains sort of the many scenarios of why your iron would be low, as opposed to just being, we have low iron, now there's other reasons why. So what are the causes of iron deficiency? Well, the most common one, I guess you would think of right away, is a dietary issue. You're not getting the diet. That would be a stark iron deficiency. To be honest with you, it's really quite hard to do unless you're eating a diet that's very standard North American. So when you think of the average North American's diet, it is pretty much low in iron foods to a certain degree if they're eating a very processed diet. You're eating a diet that starts off with breads, jams, pastries or muffins or things like that. You got some sandwiches with luncheon meat in it. You have cheese, you have crackers, you have spaghetti, some pasta sauce and whatnot, and maybe a dessert after that. So if the diet's devoid of proper proteins, if it's devoid of proper leafy vegetables or green vegetables in general, there's a high chance you're probably going to be low in iron. Also, patients that follow a vegetarian diet can also be low in iron, especially if they follow what I call a North American vegetarian diet, which is basically a crummy North American diet that's highly processed with starch and other kinds of foods, but no meat at all, right? So that's a definite red flag for iron deficiency. But there's other things as well. Like, I mean, even if you just don't have enough green vegetables, the darker the greener the better. I mean, some people say, well, which vegetable has the best amount of iron? Which one should I focus on? To be honest with you, I just get patients to eat a wide variety of different vegetables. As long as they're green, They can be leafy or not, like broccoli is not too leafy, but it's fantastic. I mean, kale is amazing, spinach, collard greens, rapini, asparagus. There's many, many vegetables out there, so just pick and choose and take a whole bunch of them. You don't have to pick one and just stick to that one all the time because it seems at the highest level. Just pick whatever and make sure you do that. Meats are fantastic, especially if they're grass-fed meats. The grass contains the natural vitamin A, D, E, and K as well, which helps a lot with nutrition, but there's also higher in iron, and the type of meat is fine. I mean, some say, do I have to eat red meat all the time? I mean, red meat has a high amount of B12 and iron in it, but you can get it in other forms of meat as well, so you don't have to always focus on red meat solely. Things that help with iron binding in the body is when you take it with vitamin C and eat high protein meals. That also helps a lot with iron binding in the body. Okay. Other foods or food types that can aggravate iron absorption are phytates or phytic acid, which is an antioxidant found in grains, especially whole grains, oddly enough, and legumes and things like that. They bind certain minerals and slow their absorption. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of grains in general, especially wheat or gluten, for so many other reasons. But one of the things it does is it affects our iron binding. I've had patients where you've taken them off just wheat and gluten alone, and it's made a huge difference in their iron level stores. Other things like tannins, which are found in black teas, grapes, seeds, and different skins. Tannins are drying compounds that create that tartness in your mouth, and tannins also slow the absorption of iron. So if you have low iron, probably best to avoid black teas and different kinds of teas and stuff, because they can affect iron binding as well. Other issues around low iron can form also from absorption issues. So these can be from low stomach acid. If you're not producing enough stomach acid, you can't break down protein properly. If you can't break down protein properly, you can't make albumin, which is a transport truck that carries the iron in the body. So that would be called a ferritin deficiency in the body, like a transport issue. So that could be a problem. Things like coffee and alcohol also affect stomach acid production. They also affect digestion, so they greatly compromise the body's ability to break down certain proteins, which means you can't carry the iron either. Food sensitivities to certain foods. The most common ones are usually wheat, gluten type foods, dairy products, and sugar. They seem to also aggravate the digestive system as well as the bowel, preventing from absorbing iron. And food sensitivities that people can have that are more unique to their case can also be an issue. A patient can also have an issue absorbing protein itself. Now this can be because there's issues with the intestinal lining, there's inflammation going on from maybe other foods that they're eating, or they have an underlying inflammatory bowel condition, or possibly undiagnosed celiac that can also affect the absorption rate of things, which could affect iron. Another thing that can affect iron a lot is overgrowth of yeast or candida. Candida is an organism that actually lives in everybody in small amounts, but if we eat a diet that's not ideal, or there's other factors going on that's acidifying the body, it triggers a yeast reaction. Yeast usually aggravates the intestinal lining. It can cause a wide variety of symptoms, but as that lining is irritated, it also decreases the absorption capacity for certain foods and minerals and different kinds of vitamins, one of them being iron can be an issue. Patients can also have occult bleeding, which is any sort of inflammatory issue in the gut, or maybe a bleeding ulcer of some kind that can cause blood to come out in the stool. Sometimes it can be visible, sometimes not. But if you're having bleeding that's occurring even on a very, very small level, you're losing a lot of blood, which can cause a drop in iron. Same thing for women with menstrual issues. If they have a long menstrual period or excessive menstrual flow, it can also cause a decrease in iron. That's sort of like people robbing the TVs from the store at night. So you come back and there's no TVs in the store. It's almost like that with the iron is being robbed from your body because you're losing so much blood or small amounts of blood over a long period of time. But one of the most common causes of iron deficiency for a lot that hits a lot of these things, and people often don't realize this, is stress. In my practice, we have people that come in that are eating really well, they have a decent lifestyle, they're not doing things that are overtly causing them low iron, they're not having any crazy menstrual issues, there's no occult bleeding, but they still have low iron, and in spite of taking iron supplements, they just can't get that iron up. And a lot of the times when we do testing in the office, we find out it's a cortisol issue or a stress issue of some kind. The reason how stress works is not that stress directly causes iron to just flood out of your body, but it creates a cascade of events that affects the absorption of iron, the ability to hold iron, and metabolism in the body. For example, the more stressed we are, the less stomach acid we produce. The less stomach acid we produce, the less protein we can absorb or break down, the less protein we absorb into the body, the less iron we can carry. The more stressed we are in the body, the more we burn through things, the more we burn our iron sources, that can also affect the body as well. So stress also irritates the bowel lining. It can cause microinflammation and leaky gut just from stress alone, and that can affect the body's ability to absorb iron. So stress has such a big effect on the body. It can affect us on the actual iron level, it can affect us on an absorption level, it can affect us on a metabolism level, and overall all these things together can cause low iron in the body. So what are the foods that are highest in iron? I mean, everybody knows it's red meat. I mean, that's one of them for sure. And again, the best sources of meat, of course, to get is grass-fed, pasture-type meats. Obviously a lot better, higher nutritional value because the cow or whatever animal is eating a diet that's designed to eat. Therefore, it absorbs a lot better. We get more nutrition to the body. You can also get it in poultry and other kinds of meats like that too. Organ meats are also great. If you are going to get organ meat, make sure it's organic sourced for sure. That's very, very important. So like liver, stuff like that, maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but it is high in iron as well. Seafoods like small fish, like sardines and things, also contain small amounts of iron. Halibut, haddock, perch, salmon, tuna are great sources of iron as well. There is iron found in beans, and of course dark green leafy vegetables. The best ones are like spinach, broccoli, rapini, and different collard greens. So one of my absolute favorite greens, and I talk about this a lot in practice, is kale. Kale is a great, great vegetable. Some people hate it, some people love it. I think they hate it because they haven't made it properly, but it's fantastic because you can add it to shakes. You just put it in the blender. You can chop it up really, really, really fine and just throw it into any kind of food you want. People throw it into salads. You can put it into stir-fried meats. You can put it into stir-fried rices. You can throw it into soups. You can throw it, just add it to like pretty much any kind of food you want. And if you add it chopped up really fine, it doesn't overwhelm you with its flavor. It adds great coloring to food as well, and you can pretty much add it to anything. So it's a great, great vegetable with a high amount of iron in it for the amount that you get. Certain dried fruits such as raisins and apricots also have iron in it, but I'm not a huge fan of dried fruit for so many other reasons. People say, well, what about iron fortified foods? There are iron fortified cereals, iron fortified breads and pastas. I'm not a huge fan of iron fortified food because it basically means the food is totally devoid of all nutrition, and they kind of add some iron filings in at the end and said, there you go, you have the iron, which is probably not the best way to get iron. So not a huge fan of the fortified stuff, but those are ways you can get iron into the diet. But the key is basically eating a diet high in vegetables, decent amount of meat, reducing the starch intake, especially the wheat and gluten type foods, and dairy and sugar as well can also affect iron. So as far as iron supplementation goes, there's so many kinds of iron supplements out there. I mean, one of the most common ones is a ferrous fumarate type, which is usually what your doctor will recommend. It usually has about 300 milligrams of iron per tablet, which seems like a lot. But the problem with that type of iron, it's very difficult to digest. And one of the biggest complaints of it is constipation or digestive issues. And the stool actually comes out gray, like it comes out like you're pooping iron. And it's such a high amount of iron because you absorb very little of it. They have to use a pretty moderate dose of it so you can absorb it into the body. But there are better kinds of irons out there. There's heme irons, there's iron citrates, there's other liquid forms of irons as well that absorb a lot better. Now if you look at the dose of some of these, you'll notice they're a lot lower. So some of them will be about 50 milligrams of iron per serving, 30 milligrams, maybe 40 milligrams per capsule, and you'll look at them and say, well, this one's 40 milligrams, the other one's 300 milligrams, so this one's better bang for your buck. But the reality is that you absorb the other one so much better, so you don't need so much of it. So you can still get your iron up without taking 20 of these tablets, without having all the constipation or digestive issues that come along with it. As well, folate and B12 work with the formation of red blood cells, so these are fantastic vitamins to take along with your iron supplements. So make sure you take your iron with food. Make sure you take it with vitamin C. You can get that with different kinds of foods. And another great way to get iron in food, which is great for lots of people, whether you're vegetarian or not, is to cook with one of these, a cast iron pot. These are fantastic, or a pan or whatever you want to cook with. They're great. Some people don't like them because they find them really heavy, but they're fantastic because they hold heat really well. Once you season the pan well, they cook fantastic on. You can take it right out of the stove and put it, right off the burner, right into the oven. So it's great to broil food at the end or do whatever you want with them. But when you cook with these, it also infuses iron into the food as well naturally. Okay, so thanks a lot for listening. This is Jason Lee for the Naturopathic Vlog, and look forward to seeing you at the next vlog. Take care.